It says in Bamidbar, Numbers, the first chapter, the very first verse. And the Lord spoke with Moshe in the wilderness of Sinai within the tent of meeting on the first of the second month after the exodus from the land of Egypt. And he says, take a census of the entire Israelite community, their offspring by parental line, according to the number of names, every male by their head count. You and Aaron tally them from 20 years and up by their group, and all whom are fit for service in Israel. A man from every tribe shall be with you, each one the head of his parental line. And then it goes on in verse 5, listing the tribes. What is significant about this? Very specific to say on the first day of the second month in the second year following the Exodus. Very specific thing. Why does he mention it with such specificity? That right? Whew, got that one out. Why mention that and then mention that it is in the wilderness of Sinai in the tent of meeting? What's the point of it's pretty obvious they were in Sinai. It was pretty obvious they were in the wilderness, in the desert. And it was pretty obvious that they had the tent of meeting. We know that. Why does the Torah mention these two places when it actually appears sort of not very important? Ever since the tabernacle was built, the Lord spoke to Moses from that particular place called the tent of meeting. That was actually the Mishkan. And that the people were in the wilderness. It's pretty obvious to everybody when we're reading and studying the Torah, that's what was going on. Well, there's a quote from Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch that reads this way. The census was taken in the wilderness. From this we learn that the census was not for economic or political purposes, for these have no bearing in the wilderness. Rather, the addition of the words Sinai in the tent of meeting indicates that this census was dedicated to the Torah given at Mount Sinai, with the tent of meeting being the place for accepting responsibility to follow its commandments. We see these two expressions indicate not only where the Lord spoke with Moses in the tent of meeting, but also the object of the census itself. That is the dedication of the Torah. Two very important, significant events. We can have the dedication of the Torah without hearing the voice of God, and you have nothing more than words written on paper. It is the reception or the receiving of the oral Torah that Moses had and then subsequently taught those people that came under his study or his lectures or teaching. And it was the combination of the two that became so very important. The combination of the wilderness, representing the public sphere, and the region that does not belong to anyone in particular on one hand, and the tent of meeting, that is the Holy of Holies, restricted to the Lord's communing with Moses for him to receive the teachings and commandments, on the other hand, is indicative of a unique combination that every human being must experience in their life. Why the desert? Why the wilderness? It says that HaShem had to bring them out into the desert where materialism and every distraction that you could possibly manage to have could be cut away. It was just them and HaShem. You see, it's this wilderness experience that it says that a tzaddik or a righteous person is formed. We understand from the sages of blessed memory, they remind us that a person who never goes through struggles is actually being rewarded here on this earth. HaShem makes a very profound statement in the Torah in which he says that a person that serves me and loves me, I will be faithful to 1,000 generations. What does that mean? That means beyond 1,000 generations, you will continue to receive merit for your service to him. In Alom haba, the world to come. And at the same time, he says to a person that does not follow these commandments, I will reward them expediently. What does he mean by that? Does it mean he punishes them immediately? No. What it means is a person, and we often ask this question, why do we see the prosperity of the wicked? David even says, why do I see the wicked prosper? And the answer is, HaShem is paying them back. He pays every person measure for measure. And if he knows that that person is not going to be in the world to come, he will reward them in this world. That's a profound idea. That's scary. That's scary. Which we should understand. If you are struggling and you're going through the wilderness and it seems like you're constantly going around the mountain, one more time. Okay, no. I hope you're laughing out of the joy of the message, not out of ridiculous. But what does this offer us? I mean, this idea that the wilderness is a place where you get close to Hashem, you would think, why could it not be that the closeness to Hashem is obtained in the land, in Canaan? That wasn't the case. As a matter of fact, they lost the manna when they went into the land. They lost the fact or the ability of their clothes not wearing out. They lost so many things that they had in the wilderness that they don't have in the land. There was something very unique to this message. In the Midrash it says this, the Lord spoke to Moshe in the wilderness of Sinai. Rather, whoever does not make himself like the wilderness, the Hefker, open to all, cannot attain wisdom and Torah. Therefore it says, in the wilderness of Sinai. So what is it about the wilderness of Sinai? Now I'm not saying here that if you are not as miserable as hell, you're not close to God, okay? I'm not saying that. And there are some people who can avoid a lot of difficulties in their life by making themselves like a wilderness. Now follow me for a second. What does it mean to make yourself like a wilderness? It is the absence of materialism. It is natural purity and humility before God. It gives human beings the ability to listen to their inner voice. It's stopping the clutter to hear the voice of God. I'm reminded whenever I wanted to get one of my children to calm down and to hear me, and we've all done this if you have children, you stop them, you hold their arms by their side, and you look them in the eye, and you have no other distractions. You might tell them to turn off the radio or whatever noise is going on, and you look them straight in the eye and you go, I have got to get your attention. This is what Hashem desired for the people that came out of Egypt. But this is also indicative of every human being that will ever draw close to Hashem. You see, this age that we're living in, though we may not be toiling with bricks with no hay, and though we may not be sweating by the sweat of our brow building great edifice for a king, for Pharaoh, we most definitely can find ourselves completely enslaved by technology and by the realms of modern society. We find the clutter so large and noisy that you just cannot hear the voice of Hashem. Someone asked me the other day, can a person hear God speak to them? Now, obviously, if someone comes to you and says that they audibly hear the voice of God, you probably should help them go see a doctor, okay? But is it possible to hear the voice of God? Yes, absolutely it is. Now, we don't get into all the blue smoke and cherubims and, hear voices coming out and somebody comes to us and prophesies over us. We don't do this in Judaism. However, Hashem does speak to us. How does He speak to us? He speaks to us in the circumstances of our life. You see, it's at that quiet time that you can finally realize, that's what it was. That's what I need to correct. I'm reminded of the story that one of our members in the community has told me, and he said that one evening, I'm going to try to make this as generic enough that nobody will really pay attention, but one evening he leaves and goes into Kingwood, and he knew he had to work on some things, but he wasn't sure how he was going to approach it. He wasn't sure what Hashem thought about it. He kind of spent some time praying about it. And on the way back, he was following a Houston police officer, and the officer slammed on his brakes and went behind him and pulled him over, and then came to the window and rolled the window down and just commenced to just laying him out, right? Just bye 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 bye. You never follow a police officer like that. He's like going on and on. I mean, instead of just writing a ticket, he just let him have it and then wrote him a ticket in front of his wife and family. It was humiliating. He said he rolled up the window after it was over and drove off and went, okay, so Hashem, I get it. That's you letting me know how displeased you are with what I'm doing. Had nothing to do with the ticket. You understand what I'm saying? He sent a reminder to say, okay, if you want to know how I feel about this, this is how I feel. It was a major change. You see, it's hearing the voice of Hashem that draws us to changing or making corrections to our midot, our character traits. If you have negative character traits, we all know what they are. I love what Rob Dror says often. Everybody knows if you are a jerk. Everybody knows when, now I'm not talking about everybody around, well, yes, I guess everybody else around you would know that too. But I'm talking about every person that's a cognitive and aware, you know your problems. You know if you have a lying tongue. You know if you get angry and you burst into a fit of rage at times. You know that. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. So what do we do with it? You've got to slow yourself down and find yourself in the wilderness so that you could quiet the inner voice, or so you can quiet yourself so that you can hear the inner voice. These characteristics from the foundation for the perfect acceptance of Torah is really, really important. You see, all of us in this room are here because we've accepted Torah in our life. We realize there's the value that we should accept this Torah. But without drawing ourselves into the wilderness and developing humility, and without the ability to hear the voice of Hashem, that Torah can fall on very deaf ears or very stony hearts. The Torah is not acquired through pride and self-importance. Torah is not acquired through ease. Torah is acquired through struggle. And especially people that come out of their previous religious beliefs to become B'nai Noach or convert, you realize the sacrifice that you've undergone just to accept the yoke of Torah. You remember the mental struggles that you had between what you previously believed and what God says, and rectifying those two things. And it felt like that you were ripping your soul out to do that. And even at some point, at the beginning at least, the sense of endangering your life. Endangering your life. Endangering your relationship with your spouse and your children, with your family members and friends. You see, this is the wilderness. Everyone that I speak to that has gone through where you've gone through all have the very same experience. Very same experience. There's little nuances and differences, but all have that very same experience that says, I'm lonely, I'm broken, and my life is not going well. And I say, welcome to the world of the people of God, because that's just the way it is. We will never be able to receive Torah without first becoming a broken vessel. We'll never be able to receive Torah until we make a vessel for His presence to be found. Those who wish to receive Torah and wisdom must labor and train themselves to acquire the suitable characteristics. In the Zohar, it talks about forming a vessel. You've got to form the right vessel. You see, what's beautiful is Hashem knows the kind of vessel that you can form. Not every vessel needs to be the same cookie cutter vessel. Every person has a different vessel. You understand? If I'm cooking in a kitchen, could you imagine trying to cook a nice meal for everyone and the only thing that you have is celery? But you need a little variety. You need onions and celery and peppers and all kinds of different varieties of things to create that dish. Hashem knows exactly what you need, and so when you begin to come close to Torah and you begin to examine yourself before Hashem, He then begins to induce certain things into your life to form that vessel. Now we can do one of two things. We can kick against it, scream against it, ask God to remove it, but I can guarantee you this: without fully accepting that everything is from Hashem, you will never be able to receive the full amount of wisdom from Torah that you could receive. That means that everything that happens to you in your life, you have to just turn and say, this is from my Creator. It's from my Abba. And He loves me, and He knows He doesn't want to hurt me. But most definitely, if He's requiring this of me, then He must have an amazing reward for me. And that's the secret, an amazing reward. Rendering mutual assistance and being satisfied with little and welcoming guests is among the cornerstone of life for dwellers in the wilderness. You think, Rod, why did you mention such mundane, simple things? Because we bring more clutter in our lives with religion than we do the simplicity of serving Hashem. I'm not saying doing away with religious things, but we have to remember that simple service to Hashem is a part of dwelling with God. You see, we can only show holiness to each other. We can't show holiness to God. Our holiness doesn't do anything for Hashem. But our holiness toward each other, the way we welcome each other, the way we treat people, is an amazing thing that causes us to bring about all the right conditions for that wisdom to be imparted to us. Therefore, the wilderness was a suitable place for the Israelites to become the people to accept the Lord's teaching, as presented in this week's reading in the tent of meeting in Bamidbar. The census of the Israelites in the wilderness, the encampment of the tribes under their standards and their tribal chieftains, and the placement of the tabernacle in the midst of the encampment. You remember the incredible order that took place? You had the Mishkan, and you had each one of the tribes around the camp, and then you had the Garim that was on the outside of that. And in the eyes of Balaam, in Numbers, the 24th chapter, verse 5, Balaam was amazed at the beauty and the splendor of that order. From the outside, this is what he saw. How fair are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling, O Israel. See, though you realize that you are in chaos and in a wilderness, and you feel the torture of not having the nice spices of Egypt and the leeks and the onions, the outside people see the beauty of Hashem. And so for those who struggle with the tensions in their life and the abandonment, know that this process is what causes other people to see a great light. It is a process. The tension between the desert and the place of abandonment, meticulous order demanded of the people. This is the place where there was something forged in the character of the people. Years of wandering in the wilderness provide the formative period of the history of the Jewish people. And despite all the people's shortcomings in coping with the Lord's commandments during this period, their wandering in the desert is remembered favorably by the Creator. As expressed by the prophet Jeremiah, it says, "Thus saith the Lord, I accounted to you your favor, the devotion of your youth, your love as a bride, how you followed me in the wilderness, in a land not sown." You see, the wilderness also figures as a means of education in this week's Haftorah portion. This week's Haftorah portion is Hosea, the 2nd chapter. If you remember, he's having to deal with his wife that has been unfaithful. I love these words. It deals with the question that he has with HaShem: how do I restore my relationship with my spouse? What do I do? The suggestion is given in the Haftorah by HaShem. It says, assuredly I will speak coaxingly to her and lead her through the wilderness, and speak to her tenderly. The Lord relates to Israel as a woman who he is about to entice and lead again to the wilderness. There she shall respond as in the days of her youth, when she came up from the land of Egypt. You see, if you find yourself in the wilderness, understand that you've been lured. You've been courted by the Creator of the universe to draw close to Him. You see, it's a great gift. Since the theme of this prophecy concerns this sort of struggle and competition, the wilderness serves as a solution, since there is no competition there in the wilderness. You see, there is a distraction in the wilderness. You're really focused at that point. By sustaining Israel in the wilderness, the bond between Israel and the Lord grew. The bonds, like bonds between two spouses who spend time together on vacation or a honeymoon, it builds up these bonds. The wilderness is said in Jeremiah 2:2 is also where the couple began their relationship. This sort of love story in Jeremiah is really speaking of the love story between the Creator of the universe and His people. It's also where the couple began to have a deep love for each other, a desire for each other, when it was powerful and endued with the mutual trust, and will then bring them to renew their vows, so that after the divorce will come a renewed unification. It says, and I will espouse you forever. I will espouse you with righteousness and justice, and with goodness and mercy, and I will espouse you with faithfulness when you shall be devoted to the Lord. Today, I had a young, frum woman from across the Atlantic get a hold of me, and we were chatting back and forth about her struggles in her life and where she's going. And she was talking about emunah and the difficulties that she's had in her life. And she said, I typed and I said, your struggles, because I knew I was going to teach this lesson, I said, your struggles is what causes us to draw close to HaShem. She says, I know, but I've disappointed so many people because I failed so many times. And I said, every failure is a mitzvah when you do tshuva. Every failure is a mitzvah when you do tshuva. See, as human beings, we become so negative that we think our wilderness experience is abandonment from the Creator. It's not. It's not. Every time you get some news that seems to draw you further away from everything in your life that you find important, know that it is an opportunity to draw close to HaShem. You see, that is what this is about. It's about seeking HaShem now while He can be found. It's about understanding that the desert is really the birthplace of righteousness. It's not the palaces. It's not the great food that Egypt offers. It is the desert, where you have no hot and cold running water, where you have no ease of life, everything's a struggle, that righteousness is birthed. And if you find yourself in the desert, guess what? The Creator of the universe knows that righteousness is what will become the hallmark of your life. So instead of being down on yourself, say, HaShem, you must know what I need. And because of that, I'm going to apply myself, and I will study Torah, and I will change the negative characteristics in my life so that I can be a light to the nations.